Hustle and Sparkle community, thanks so much for tuning in today. And this video today is really going to speak to those people that really want to start their own business. You have an idea, you can't get it out of your brain, you've decided that you want to launch it, and now you're like, oh my gosh, where do I begin? So this is a two-part video. But part one is we're going to deal with some of the heavier stuff, which is tackling finances, which can be daunting, especially if you're not a numbers person, but please don't worry. These are necessary steps, but I think you're going to get peace of mind out of doing it. So even though finances, what I find when I coach people, they absolutely procrastinate in knowing this information. They'll even put it off onto a financial planner or somebody else to solve this problem. But this is the number one thing that each individual entrepreneur needs to dig into, because it's going to ensure the launch of your business and also ongoing success and profitability on a monthly basis. So let's jump into this. So dealing with your finances, we've actually created a financial flush out worksheets for you, because there's 4 categories that you really want to dive into when you start planning your business, and also planning for when you can be able to launch it, whether that's part-time or you jump into it full-time. So the first thing is taking a look at what are all the costs that are associated to my business to actually getting it going. So for example, let's take a catering business. Maybe you love to cook and you want to do lunchtime catering to offices, for example. You've got to sit down and think about, okay, what is all the possible costs that are associated just to me launching this business? Do I need equipment? Do I need dishes? Do I need cutlery? Do I need a vehicle to transport the food? What are the costs associated to the vehicle? Do I need a website? Do I need any marketing materials? There's that overhead cost and that's completely separate from all of the other costs that you need to sit down and flush that out. I would just sit there and brainstorm all the possible costs that might be associated to that particular business. And then go online and actually look for the individual costs. It's not going to be perfect. Don't worry about it being perfect. This is not about perfection, but this is about you getting sort of like an overhead general idea of the cost of launching that business. Okay. Number 2 is you need to dive into what are your monthly costs. So imagine yourself, you're already in the business, you've got the equipment, you've got the space, whatever it may be. Now you're looking at, okay, what are my monthly overhead costs? So let's say, for example, you're a photographer and part of your overhead cost is renting out a space. So what is the cost of that space? Do you need insurance for that space? Are there utilities associated to that, or property taxes? These are all the sort of, what is your hosting fee for your website on a monthly basis? Do you have any sort of preset marketing that you're going to be doing that's associated to your business on a monthly basis? So just think about, like, you're in the business, and then what are your monthly overhead costs? Okay. Again, we've thrown in a bunch of ideas onto our worksheet, so at least that will get you started. Be sure to download that. Number 3 is, let's take a look at your per unit cost. So whether you're producing a product or you're providing a service, what are your actual costs to producing the work? So let's say, for example, you had a cleaning business, a house cleaning business, residential house cleaning business, and you were thinking of the costs that are associated just to clean one person's home. So what are the supplies you need? What are potentially, if you need to work with somebody else, what are their labor costs? Is there any insurance that you need to have that is associated to that one person? So what is their overall hourly cost if an employee is associated to that? So you get the idea. You want to figure out if it's you're producing a product like jewelry, depending on the product, you might have lots of different products. So what are the per unit costs of producing that particular unit? My advice is I wouldn't necessarily include your hourly cost into that. That's going to be looking at the overall profit until you start getting into hiring other people, and then you start having to include their per hour unit cost of producing that particular product. Okay, so that's your 3rd page of your workbook, and you need to really flesh that out. Now what you can do, and we're going to walk you through this, but now you can start to look at, okay, based on this, how many units of service or how many widgets in a month do I need to sell to cover all of my costs of, let's say, my cost of getting started, but then my monthly cost, and then just my per unit cost. So we're actually going to take the per unit cost and that profitability and then kind of backtrack it to figure out what is the overall profit you need to be generating on a monthly basis to cover off those costs. That's going to help you figure out, okay, do I start this business part-time? Is this the type of business that I have to jump into full-time? And it's going to help you plan out some of these steps. The last page that I think people really neglect and sort of look over is their personal living costs. So, are you committed to paying a mortgage? Are you committed to paying rent? Are there any other costs associated to that mortgage and rent, like utilities or property taxes? Do you have a vehicle that you're committed to that you have to keep? And then, of course, all the costs associated to that vehicle. You have to eat food, so what are your food costs, every week and then overall every month? Are there any, your phone, your internet, and yes, those also become business costs as well, but those are things, for now I would keep that in the personal category. These are the things that if you didn't have a business, you would still be needing to pay for. Do you have any debt or loan payments that you need to be covering while you're launching a business? These are all things that you need to consider. So that's going to factor into your profitability. You want to know your personal costs because I usually recommend that your business is at least covering off its own costs, but also about 60% of your personal costs before you make the leap and doing your business full time. Now that's not an exact equation. You'd really want to talk to your business coach or mentor about that before you take a leap, but at least this gives you a formula to actually be working towards. So I hope this gets you started at thinking about the cost of your business and will start to get you a little bit more laser focused as to how much work you need to be doing on a monthly basis, because this conversation is actually going to lead into marketing strategies, which we'll talk about for your business in another blog.